So, in addition to the main game, The Force Unleashed has 3 DLC missions. One of them
Hmm.
is a mission where you go to the ruins of the Jedi Temple, which I figure slots in to the actual game plotline pretty best immediately after the
Hmm.
Kashyyyk mission. And then you got 2 missions which are follow-ups to the game's Darkside ending, where you play as Lord Starkiller and basically continue you're knocked back to square one as a Jedi hunter, only now you're the direct Vader analog.
Hmm.
Now, discussing the Jedi Temple mission, gameplay wise, you're just taking on most of the standard Imperial units you've already
Hmm.
fought. There is one bit where you enter into a Jedi Temple training chamber that's populated by lightsaber droids, which
Which looks
kind
strangely like Proxy, funny enough. I always wondered about that. They
yeah,
literally look like just a slightly remodeled Proxy with lightsabers.
that to me actually makes sense because I think that Proxy is in another way of representing how everything about Vader is rather than being true Sith, he's twisted Jedi. He didn't repurpose some ancient Sith design to create Proxy. He repurposed an established Jedi design to create Proxy.
If nothing else, that would explain his capabilities, so I could agree with that.
Yeah.
But it is a
And
pretty fun level. You get to go through the ruins of the temple, see all the damage that Vader and the 501st caused. Not littered with corpses. They were able to clean that up, funny enough. I mean, we do have to keep things PG here, but it
yeah.
is pretty fun. But the real meat of this whole level is the Jedi trials.
Yeah. Once you get through the actual sort of Jedi Temple level proper, which I do want to mention, I love the level design
Hmm.
because it makes me feel sad. I really like
Yeah.
grand mega structures and really cool things. And I don't like seeing things fade from their former glory. And that's basically what the Jedi Temple is. You're walking through this space and you're seeing all of these things that were once really grand and impressive and cool, but are now just fallen into decay and rot. And it just makes me
It's
sad.
depressing, man.
It
It's
really is.
depressing. You see, especially when you just know, like, I mean, kids ran through here. Kids grew up here. People learned things. I mean, there's so much history behind this place. It's really
And
terrible.
yeah, it's like kids once ran through here and then kids were killed here.
Yeah, like I said, thankfully no corpses, but the feeling is definitely there.
Yeah,
So,
you're walking through a mausoleum basically.
yeah, very depressing. But like we said, the Jedi trials are the real meat of this. And funny enough, we're reintroduced. I mean, Kento Merrick also makes a little cameo, strangely
Yeah.
enough, in a
Yeah,
holocron, but whatever.
it doesn't really make much sense, but at the same
No.
time it's one of those areas where I'm willing to just go with it because maybe the way the holocron works is it interacts with force visions or something, so it manifests the gatekeeper that you want to see.
It's believable, but anyway, it's unimportant either way.
Yeah. So
So you go through several trials, and they're pretty. It's basically it's the most abstract I'd say this game ever gets. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's basically trying to teach you how to do precision force abilities and manipulate your environment to get places. And on some level, I do find it a little bit tiresome because isn't this what the game's supposed to teach you already? But on another level, it's like if you're just
That's
jumping
kind of
into
the point, though,
this,
don't you think?
yeah.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
then once you
it's
get
meant to be like a Jedi's perspective.
Yeah. So once you get through this whole obstacle course, you get the boss fight where you, as Galen Merrick, are
Hmm.
confronted by the Sith Stalker. And the thing I like is that this is pretty much a very direct reference to the scene we mentioned earlier in the novelization, where you play as the Stalker against your Jedi avatar. Whereas this is kind of turning it around. Now you're the Jedi fighting the Stalker. And firstly, talking about the Sith Stalker itself, I love the design of the Sith Stalker armor because
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's
Pale
a
skin
very
with the claws and the weird helmet. It's creepy. And what gets me the most about him is the noise he makes. That like deformed scream that's like half cybernetic, half corpse. It's really gets under
yeah,
my skin.
it's like an animalistic robot, and just the sound of the
Yeah.
respirator itself. It's like Darth Vader's, only Vader's is stentorian and consistent, whereas this thing is just sickly and creepy.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody like literally on a ventilator and it's very disturbing.
Yeah, and the fact that this creature just doesn't speak, it's just
Rah!
screeching and
Yeah.
yeah. He's
No.
scary. And
he's a difficult boss. He's a very difficult boss.
Yeah, because at some points he'll transform into a Jedi avatar with a green lightsaber, and if you attack the Jedi avatar, it actually chips away at your own health. And what the Jedi avatar does is it uses mind tricks to actually screw up the game controls, which some people criticize this, but I personally actually kind of like it because they're actually trying to find a way to work in telepathy as an enemy attack as a gameplay thing that you need to be concerned about.
Exactly. If nothing else, yeah, it makes things more interesting, and it feeds in. I wouldn't be surprised if this was kind of the infant stage of what they eventually did in the next game when they actually did incorporate mind tricks.
Exactly. So you play through the mission, you defeat the Sith Stalker boss, and I love a lot of the quick time events that come up in there because it's super interesting to just see what it's like to see two people who use the exact same fighting style but with a different guiding mentality engaging each other. It's like you got the Sith Stalker who's just savage, whereas you got Galen Merrick who's a lot more clever.
Leveled. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fight ends and you take out the Stalker and you're back in the holocron chamber. But then you have a moment where you're standing there, look at your hand, and it's the hand of the scary Sith Stalker who says in his scary Darth Malik voice, "You will never escape me."
Yeah.
And
creepy.
It's creepy as hell because that hand is just so creepy because it's not like a clean prosthetic like Vader. It's more like you got a hand, but then the flesh withers and you got this skeleton emerging from it, but the skeleton is made of metal.
Yeah, it's basically a jacked up Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. And this level is just so memorable and abstract because this is the point where they really kind of decided we're going to explore the mythological aspect of the Jedi and the Force and the spiritual side of things. And it's so interesting to play.
No, yeah, very much so. Although it is compared to what comes next with the other two DLCs, it definitely stands out a bit too.
It really does. It's the most abstract the game gets, and it's definitely a standout.
Speaking of the other DLCs, we have the next two, which, as Connor mentioned, are continuations of the Darkside ending from the game itself. And for those of you who don't know, the Darkside ending featured Galen Merrick killing Vader, with all the leadership dying and Coda getting killed, and the Emperor's basically, okay, you're mine now. But then in the last second, Merrick tries to betray him again, but this time the Emperor's ready for it, and he literally blows Galen back and pulls down Juno and the Rogue Shadow on top of his head, and then it cuts to a scene of him basically getting turned into the Sith Stalker with very disturbing sounds.
Yeah, the thing I love about this scene as well is that the scene that's presented here with Palpatine in that little reconstruction laboratory talking to the Sith Stalker on the operating table that to me is what the scene in Revenge of the Sith when Vader was unveiled should have been. It shouldn't have been Palpatine hitting Vader with one final manipulation. It should have been Palpatine laying down the law, telling him, "You had such promise. You could have been my successor, my equal, but I still have some small use for you. I still have enemies to find and destroy. You will do my bidding until I find a new apprentice. And then, like Vader, you will be cast aside. Finish him."
And then we're introduced to some really, really disturbing screams as needles are literally shoved into his face.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this leads into the DLC. Time Jump DLC mission. Now you're basically the Vader analog running around as Palpatine's enforcer. And the thing I do like about these missions is that it kind of shows Lord Starkiller is a regression. He's basically just regressed back to being Merrick as he was at the beginning of all of this, where he's just completely submissive to his master. Only this time around, instead of a willful submission, it's total coercion. It's like he's saying, "I will not fail you, my master. I'll do my job." And Palpatine's like, "We'll see."
Yeah, so dismissive, it's insulting. So it basically starts with him on Tatooine, dressed strangely like a sand person. He goes through a lot of costume changes. In fact, every mission he's wearing something different. But this one's just perplexing because he
Well,
looks so much like
actually,
a sand person.
I actually don't mind it because the impression I have is that when he arrived on Tatooine, he probably killed a sand person and stole his clothing because he needed some way to blend in. It's like he needed to look like just
Yeah.
another desert person and not like scary Sith stalker.
Oh yeah, I mean the look of it's fine. It's just interesting that they went for that choice. But basically,
Yeah.
he needs information, and the best person to get information from on Tatooine is Jabba. So he goes to Jabba's palace. Although this time you could also quote unquote fight Jawas. You could shock Jawas with lightning and use them as projectiles. Which if you ever had any fantasies about doing that, you could do that now. So basically, there's a few pointless fights with sand people and Jawas, and then he makes it to Jabba's palace and forces his way in, and Jabba's not so keen about having Sith Lords crash his pad, so he sends Gamorreans. He cuts through them rather easily, and then he finally makes it to Jabba himself.
The one thing I find interesting, though, is that as you're cutting through the Gamorreans, you hear Jabba reacting to your kills, and he's saying a lot of stuff like, "Oh, amazing! I've never seen that before." He basically lets Merrick in, well, lets Lord Starkiller in for a face-to-face meeting, essentially because he's impressed by his capabilities and wants to make a deal. Unfortunately, this goes south because Jabba is trying to double-cross him, but then the jig is blown by Jabba's protocol droid.
Yeah.
So Jabba just triggers the trapdoor, dumps Lord Starkiller into the Rancor pen, and you get a minor boss fight with the Rancor, which you have the option of killing the Rancor the way you usually kill the Rancor, or you could do it like Luke.
Yeah, and you get a little achievement for it. What was it called? Like Skywalker something? I forget.
I think it was just doing it like Skywalker, or doing it like Luke. Like literally just that. So you fight your way through the underlevels of Jabba's palace, get to the you go through this area where you're
trash compactor.
The trash compactor, and you actually encounter Proxy there.
Yeah, this is another kind of disturbing scene.
Yeah, somehow Proxy was salvaged from Corellia by someone else apparently and brought here where Jabba was doing whatever with him. And you find Proxy's damaged. He's still alive, but he's in a bad state. And he's like, "Master, is it you?" You lift him up. "It is you." And the thing I like is that for this one little moment, it's like Lord Starkiller is speaking to Proxy and asking for his help, but instead of the usual ruthless, focused Vader light he is elsewhere, here he's a bit more emotional. He's kind of stumbling over his words a bit and is trying to speak, and you kind of got the impression that he's just kind of holding back tears. He doesn't want to openly sob because what he's just been faced with has been an overt reminder of what he used to be, what he could have been, and what he is now. Because at this moment, he is exactly what Proxy is. Broken.
Yep. So he uses Proxy to get through the trash compactor, eventually makes his way to the hangar, and we get a boss fight with Boba Fett. Interesting. One of the few non-Force wielder boss fights that's actually somewhat difficult, although not extremely, but it is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You take him out.
Yeah. Sorry.
It is interesting, though, because Boba Fett's jetting around with his rocket pack, using his flamethrower, and throughout the course of the fight, it's like you got bits where Gamorreans are charging in to back him up.
Yeah, so it's some level of complexity to it, but you eventually take him out by grabbing one of his missiles and shooting it back at him. He just explodes, and you just see his helmet drop to the ground. So,
As Lord Starkiller escapes on board one of the skiffs.
Yep.
And then Lord Starkiller, using the information that he gathered, arrives in Mos Eisley Tatooine in the Millennium Falcon's landing bay just as the ship is getting ready to prepping to launch. And that's when he's confronted by the major boss of the level, old Ben Kenobi.
Yeah. I wouldn't go there if I were you.
Yep.
I have waited many years to destroy the real Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is interesting. But this boss fight's pretty fun too. challenging, that's for sure. I love this.
It's
This is another one of those instances that really hammers in the idea that old Ben is a force to be reckoned with, to be sure.
Yeah. In fact, I'd say the main reason for why his fight with Vader in the movie just looks so. It comes across as just really minimalist with both
Stilted,
of them.
yeah.
Really stilted. But the thing is that it's basically two opponents fighting each other very cautiously, never going in for any risky moves because they know exactly how powerful the other guy is. Whereas this time around, Old Ben's a little bit more confident in his ability to engage you, so he's a little bit more willing to go all out. So he's actually stepping up, and Old Man's spry. He's a heavy hitter,
Mm-hmm.
and his force abilities are nothing to thumb your nose at.
No. But you do eventually take him out by stabbing him in the chest and then throwing him into the Millennium Falcon's engine.
Where he's disintegrated.
And then you get another add-on to this boss fight, which is an interesting idea, but in my opinion is stupid.
It's Old Ben reconstituting as a force spirit and fighting you as an incorporeal being of energy.
Yeah, that sentence alone really hammers in how I feel about this. That's really dumb. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like I get that they were trying to kind of feature all of Old Ben's powers, but seriously, force spirits can't do that. I'm willing to accept everything else in this boss fight as something Old Ben can do, but that, no. Like, come on. If you choose to face Vader, you must do it alone. I cannot interfere. Well, why are you interfering here?
Yeah, exactly. That makes no sense. It's really dumb. It's just completely ridiculous, and it's something that should just be glossed over because basically he fights the ghost dissipates, but the Millennium Falcon launches off before Lord Starkiller can get a hand on it, and that's where that DLC ends.
He manages to slap a tracker onto the external hull, which I did kind of enjoy because it was a nice little reference to the Attack of the Clones thing where Obi does the same thing to Jango Fett. So you just killed Obi and did the same thing.
And that leads into the final DLC, which takes place. Well, there's another time jump. We're suddenly brought to the battle, which is interesting because apparently the Alliance still formed, even though all the leaders are dead.
Well, I think the reason why it formed is because Leia was still alive.
True, very true, very true.
She wasn't captured. The Empire didn't know about her.
Yeah,
she didn't actually attend the treaty. Yeah, she didn't attend the treaty. She was kind of there via webcam because proxy.
Exactly.
Proxy webcam.
Exactly. So we're brought to Hoth, where Lord Starkiller basically goes through the tunnels leading to Echo Base. And on the way, you fight Wampas and Snow Rebels. Fun stuff. Yeah. It's a pretty faithful recreation of the battle, and you do see a lot more of Echo Base. But that ultimately climaxes, well, not climaxes, well, there's two climaxes, but basically the first climax is where you meet Luke Skywalker, and you get your first boss fight with him in a breathing chamber.
Yeah, this one is a pretty straightforward, is a pure lightsaber boss fight because it's just you having to contend with Luke's lightsaber skills mainly. And it's a decent fight, but it kind of ends on a bit of a low note with Luke falling over, tripping, dropping his lightsaber with Starkiller advancing on him. So to deal with that, he just uses telekinesis to tear the door off of one of the Wampa holding pens and lets them contend with you while he runs off.
Yeah, which to be fair is sort of consistent with his skill level at this point in time because this is before Dagobah happened and all that. So he is still kind of running on his own steam at this point, but it does kind of break the flow a bit. But you know, it's nothing else that's interesting.
Yeah. So you continue to fight through, and then you get to the main hangar where now you got your big final boss fight with Luke, where things unfold. First, at this point, Luke is kind of starting to draw on the dark side, like not full-on committed, but he's a bit tougher than he was before. But you can take him down using many of the same tricks. It's just a little bit more of a grind. After getting beaten like this, he fully embraces the dark side. His eyes turn yellow, and he starts shooting red lightning at you. And this boss fight is a lot tougher.
Indeed, it is yes, it's definitely a challenge because you're getting. He really likes to spam that red lightning. That's for sure.
Yeah, I find
and that it does a lot of damage.
Yeah, when you're engaging Luke at this point, Vader it up, defense, defense, defense. Do not try and step up as an aggressor. He'll crush you.
No, but it definitely makes for an interesting scenario. You're Lord Starkiller fighting Dark Luke. I mean, what's more to say?
Yeah.
But ultimately, you do eventually take him out in a very there's a lot of homages in this fight to the film's fights. Like there's a brief sequence where he's just slamming his lightsaber on you so many times. It's very reminiscent of his quote unquote takedown move of Vader in Return of the Jedi. But you eventually avoid that, take his own lightsaber and cut his hand off, the exact same hand that he loses, well, ironically, at this stage.
Yeah.
In Empire Strikes Back.
And then during this moment where it's like
the Falcon is making an escape.
The Falcon's making its escape. Lord Starkiller grabs it with telekinesis and basically says, the only way you can stop me and save your friends is by embracing your rage and giving in to the dark side. Come on, kiddo, do it. You know you want to. So Luke does it, fires lightning at Lord Starkiller, disrupting his telekinesis, but Lord Starkiller intercepts it with his lightsaber and just channels it back and basically says, very good, my apprentice. And this is This is basically the cycle repeating itself. So, closing thoughts on the game. Well, I will agree that in a lot of ways this game is a little bit overrated, but at the end of the day, it's earned its spot on the list of classic Star Wars games. It truly is one of the greats. And the story is interesting and compelling. The characters are pretty well rounded and very well conceived in a lot of ways. I have my quibbles about all of them. It's like Galen Merrick with his background should be a lot more unstable and psychotic. There should be a little bit more of a sociopath. It's like he should be more like a character from NBC's Hannibal rather than the guy we have in the game is just a little bit too
one-dimensional. Yeah.
Well-adjusted is what I would have said. But yeah, he should have been more unstable, which is actually one area where I think Force Unleashed 2 fixes that problem. That Starkiller is just full-on irrational and insane.
Which we will be getting to, by the way. We will be getting to that at some point.
We will be getting to that. But overall, it's like, this game's great. It's got a whole bunch of interesting characters. It explores some really interesting sides. Like, we actually get to see Imperial brutality and Imperial oppression. We get a true understanding for why the Empire is evil as fuck.
Yeah.
And we get the deconstruction of Vader himself, because in a lot of ways, this game and its follow-up are, more than anything else, they're about Vader. They're about all of the things he tries to do as a Darksider and kind of all of the ways where his own failure is engineered into his enterprises because he himself is a contradiction.
No, I agree with just about everything you say. Overall, like, the game is by no means flawless, and neither is the story. And it's not even arguably, I mean, I don't know if I'd put it in the top 5 as far as Star Wars stories goes, game-wise at least. But it is, like we said in the beginning, the main goal of this game was to create a bridge between the two trilogies and tell a compelling story. And I think it exceeds on that very well. There are a lot of memorable moments. The gameplay is simple but very fun, to say the least. And at the end of the day, there's a reason that these characters in this story has persevered for so long. It has its own unique look, it has its own unique feel, and it has a lot about it that, fans remember to this day. So I'd say at the end of the day, I would still recommend this to everybody. This is still a must play for any Star Wars fan out there.
Yeah, the game, like touching on the gameplay again, it's nice and varied because they do a good job of giving you lots of different enemy types and lots of different environments to play around in. So you're able to experiment with different kinds of features and tricks. And some parts of the game, it's like where they do something, they're able to make super challenging but fun gameplay by doing very simple things, just by mixing up their enemies and, making use of their environments.
It's definitely one of those games that you can play through it multiple times and have a slightly different experience just by mixing combos and trying new approaches.
Indeed.
All right, so I guess at the end of the day, we both recommend it highly.
Yeah, it holds up really well. It's going to be 10 years old in a few months, and you know what? For a 10-year-old game, it's
pretty good.
It's rock solid.
Yep. Well, with that said, I think that pretty much wraps up our little review of The Force Unleashed. Unless you have anything else to say, Connor.
No, I'm done.
All right, well, then let's wrap everything up. I'm Evan Nova. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Jenserai1 signing off. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye.